Okay, I'm John Small. Um, I'm old. Got some experience, and I'm frustrated with the way things are going in the world and in the way things are going in my profession, which is psychology. I run a free clinic in family psychology. I came at this field in a little different way. My first degree was in philosophy, and it was Aristotelian philosophy in preparation for the priesthood. I was a Carmelite monk. My second degree was in theology. My third degree was in physics, and I started my priesthood in teaching high school and counseling students, not by intention, but the kids came to me. And so I taught physics for 10 years. I realized that I was doing more counseling than I was doing physics. And so I went to Loyola, went to 8 University, and took undergraduate psychology, not counseling. But during that time teaching physics, I had a 16-year-old student, Ellen, and I assigned her a research paper. An experimental paper, and instead of writing an experiment, she wrote me a poem. And I read it, and it was beautiful. And I gave her the paper back with an A+. She looked at me, and she said, I was testing you. I said, what? And she said, yeah. I wanted to see if you had passed the test, and you did. And she said, I wanted to give you this book. And what she gave me was Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. The history of Gautama Buddha. It changed my life. And I read everything I could about Buddhism. And then went to Missouri and got a master's and PhD in psychology, taught, counseled, and ended up running a free clinic. I'm almost 80 years old, and I've been thinking, and I've been frustrated, and I wanted to share it with you. And I'm going to title what I'm going to tell you as the epistemology of love. And I want to tell you that that's a contradiction. And the contradiction is what I want to share with you. Because that has made me who I am. If you look at that title, the Epistemology of Love. Epistemology. Learn that word in Aristotelian philosophy. The epistemology is the study of truth. That's been frustrating me ever since I heard that word. And I heard it when I studied Aristotelian philosophy. Because what that implied was that there was truth. And there might be. But when I was learning psychology, and I learned psychology by people coming to ask me for help. And I paid attention to what they were telling me and how I was helping them. And I realized that it was love. That wasn't truth. But I had a degree in physics. That was truth. And then I realized that it wasn't that simple. For instance, one of the things that I learned was one of my favorite physicists believed in the Big Bang Theory. That was Stephen Hawking. And the Big Bang Theory starts out with the universe started with the universe being condensed into a non-dimensional point. That's a contradiction. That's a contradiction. And then I learned that the whole world was that way. What do I mean by that? Everything in physics is based on a postulate. Everybody knows we studied geometry. Nobody knows we don't study geometry. What do I mean by that? The geometry that I learned in high school was Euclidean geometry. Parallel lines do not meet. But I just studied physics. I had a degree in physics. I found out there were 3 geometries. Euclidean, Riemannian, and Lobachevskian. So I looked into that. And I found out that relativity, the relativity of Einstein, which he didn't believe was relative, the relativity of Einstein was based on Euclidean, Riemannian, and Lobachevskian geometry. And then I realized that the physics that I had learned in college from Notre Dame was Newtonian physics. And in Newtonian physics, it was very interesting. What was that? The name of the guy, Law of Parsimony? Occam's Razor.
Yes.
William of Ockham.
Mm-hmm.
What he said was the law of parsimony. The simplest explanation was the right one. Dirac, the French physicist, said that every complicated equational system contained the more simple as a special case. That means they were more complicated. And Einsteinian was the more complicated. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, it does make sense. And so when I taught physics, I taught Newtonian physics, Einsteinian physics, both.
Is this when you started to believe that there are no absolutes?
Well, I don't believe that there are no absolutes. I believe that there can be absolutes, but I believe that we don't know them.
Right?
And the kids saw that. And in our school, in our state, 15% of our students took physics. In our school, 85% did. They got it.
That's wonderful.
They got it. And my life changed.
How
Because
so?
I saw things so differently. I saw things so differently. I started to believe it. It made no sense to me at all.
Can I ask what, because you've never really told me what you thought when you were studying from an Aristotelian point of view.
You what?
You've never kind of told me how your views transitioned from your Aristotelian way of thinking. I mean, what was different back then? How did you think back then?
I believe that. Now, you want to know?
I do, yeah.
I believe what everybody that I know believes. Because I realized where people got their beliefs. And what I mean by that, it's very, very interesting. In 312, Constantine made Christianity the state religion.
Mm-hmm.
In 12, and religion took over. We didn't realize it. But very interesting things happened. Like the oldest son inherited the land. The second son was the bishop. No mention of women. And that became part of our culture in the West.
Misogyny.
And then in 1200, Thomas of Aquin wrote the Summa Theologica. Summa, the highest study, Theologica of God. That became the theological standard for theology.
And you've read that book?
I think I did. I studied all that stuff because I was a priest, and I studied theology.
And you believed that?
And I believed it.
It's fascinating.
And I realized that Aristotelianism, and I was told by my teachers, was the basis of theology. But I looked at that from my Aristotelian point of view, and I realized that what Aristotle did in epistemology was taught us that everybody saw everything the same way. And if that we were right, everybody else was wrong. That was contrary to what I learned in physics. And it was contrary to what I learned in theology. That was amazing. That was amazing. And then I learned more. I told you the person who gave me the Siddhartha. And I studied Eastern philosophy. One of the things in Eastern philosophy was everything contains its opposite. I read the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I read Buddhism. I read the whole Eastern philosophy. What's that other one? I can't remember now. It doesn't make any difference. Eastern philosophy. We all know the yin and the yang. Everything contains its opposite. Then I learned biology. And biology told me we had millions of neurons, and that these neurons were interacting with millions of neurons in other people in a matrix. And for every 2 people, there are at least 15 billion, times 15 billion minus 1, over 2. That many relationships. Right. That makes sense for Eastern philosophy, because there'd be that many relationships, it'd be contradictory. There'd be contradictory. And so I said, oh my gosh, there's contradiction. That's why I grew up in a mafia neighborhood. I had friends who were mafia that I loved, who killed people. And I said, okay, that makes sense. I related to some people. 100 ways? Another 100 ways? And they were contradictory. And I love murderers. And didn't apologize for it. And now I had a reason for it. So there were contradictions. So I could love somebody on two different levels. And then it got even crazier because I listened to somebody talk about the process of forgiveness. And he had his hands blown off. And when we talk about abuse, we say, how do we heal abuse? Everybody will tell you forgiveness. But we have people with conversion hysteria. Conversion hysteria is having a physical illness without having a psychological base. And we have people with conversion hysteria who can't be cured by forgiveness. But you've got to look more closely. When they talk about forgiveness, what people say in this day and age, in the Western world, in the Aristotelian world, is that you forgive them, but you don't condone what they did. What he said is you do that, and you hold on to that. And then you take another set of relationships and you forgive somebody, period. Contradiction. You believe two sides of a contradiction, which I came to realize was okay. And I saw people walk who had that is conversion hysteria. And I believed it. So here is my whole philosophical perspective. Change in the direction of love in a different way. It made sense. So then I looked at psychology. What do I do with that? What do I do with that? I started looking at what happened in psychology. One of the things that happened in psychology was that Carl Rogers came along. Carl Rogers believed different than everybody else. He said people were good. Go back to religion. They said in religion that God loves us. That's what Carl Rogers was saying. Not with God. But he said people were good. We have to change that.
No.
Okay.
Still going.
Okay. So I said, oh my gosh, how can Carl Rogers be right? Well, I just told you that contradictions can be okay. I can love somebody that has done something awful that I was counseling. So I could love them. I could love them. And that was okay. Then I heard other people's take on it. Truex and Kharkov said unconditional positive regard, genuineness, not blaming. That was in way back, 67, I think. In 2000, my friend Scott Miller and my friend Barry Duncan talked with John Hubble, and they wrote a book. And they said in that book, in a chapter in that book, they didn't say that, they had an author say that the what do you call that? The stuff of healing, the things that heal in therapy was relationship, more than medicine. Bingo.
Mm-hmm.
If relationship was healing, then love was healing. That's what I was saying. And it made sense. And now I have a philosophical, a physical, a scientific basis for what I was doing. I used to be scared of going to conferences and talking about love. I still taught it in classroom every day. But I was afraid to bring it to meetings because people would look at me and say, love? Your patients? Yes, love your patients in that realistic, sensible, non-sexual, scientific, philosophical way. Does that make sense? Is there any questions you have?
I don't have a question, but I just want to comment on how you've kind of opened up my eyes and the way I view my clients now. Just the fact that there are so many ways to connect to a client really helps rid myself of any biases or any maybe negative feelings I have going into a session. I always keep that in mind, and it's just miraculous what that does when you can connect with somebody or go at it from a different angle. And it's just been very enlightening, and I think I love your belief system. I love your twist on I mean, you have your own philosophy, and it just resonates with me, and it's beautiful. I really appreciate you.
Yeah. And see, that opens up so much for me.
It really, really does.
You know,
So
and
much.
one of the things that it opens up is I have always said one of the reasons that I can treat anybody is that I can see myself doing anything that my patients could have done. That doesn't mean I agree with it. It doesn't mean I'll do it. But I can have that possibility. And so I'm going to hate myself? No. Yeah. It also says a lot about the way we treat our patients. I don't talk to them as if I'm telling them I'm right and you're wrong. I'm telling them I agree with you on some things, I don't agree with you on others, and I love you.
Yeah.
I tell them that.
Sure.
And it's okay.
We had a conversation a few weeks ago about insurance companies really trying to implement the cognitive behavioral model. And you and I were having a hard time marrying that concept with love.
Yeah.
Have you thought any more about that, and maybe how we can bridge those two, or kind of join those two?
Well, what's happening, what I learned from person up in St. Paul.
Oh,
Noel Larson, yeah. Is that the research is coming out now that cognitive behavioral therapy works, but it has a limitation of several years. This opens up all kinds of things. I want to teach my students love, not cognitive behavioral. And I don't know how to say this, except I have had a patient for 55 years. We're still in contact. She's doing fine. Yeah. You know. My students still write to me. Last year, one of my students donated $10,000 to my free clinic. It doesn't stop. Love doesn't stop. Love doesn't end. Now, it has some really, really powerful and scary things that go with this. And I gotta tell you that. Two especially. One is evolution. I've been a believer in evolution because I've read the evolution stuff in physics. You're not going to be surprised. I believe in that differently. I believe in survival of the fittest. What's the guy's name?
Darwin. Darwin.
Darwin. I believed in that since I was a kid in grammar school. I'm almost 80. I've got a disability, disabled parking sticker. That isn't survival of the fittest. We're changing. We're changing. People are fighting it like hell. And we've got a crazy theory in the world of violence. But survival of the fittest is changing. And should change. And the Occupy Love movement is saying that's true. And I believe that. But I look at it as that evolution is changing, but there's some frozen dimensions that are left over from 300. One of them is misogyny, which I talked about. Everybody knows that. But it's changing. One of it is homophobia. And it's changing. One of them is racism. I call them frozen pieces of evolution. But that's changing too. And that brings up another thing that's really, really important to me. Not the one I was going to talk about, as the other. But that is that my father had a 7th grade education. We lived on the north side of Chicago in a white Catholic ghetto. He worked on the south side of Chicago. And he brought black men home for supper. The neighborhood went viral. But he brought them home and he kept bringing them home. 7th grade education. He wouldn't join the Knights of Columbus because they wouldn't accept black men. He wasn't stupid. He made the machines that made Budweiser beer produce 1 million bottles of beer a day. He was a supervisor. He went into the bosses of the company and he said, I'm not educated and I can't figure, but I can understand numbers. I know I made you over $1 million this past year. And they said, what do you want? And he said, I've got a $4,000 mortgage on my home. And they gave him $75 at Christmas. His men went out on strike. They asked him to stay there. They had made him supervisor so that they could get his patents. He said, these are my men. They're gone. I've gone. And he got a job as a janitor. And when I was 12, I was changing 18-wheeler tires so that I could put food on the table. And when he died, for 3 days of visitation, he was a janitor. For 3 days of visitation, hundreds of people came up to us and said, this is what your father did for us. Didn't happen by accident. served the poor, that I marched with Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael, that I learned to think differently. But there were other things that happened too. Now, those were important to me, and I have a lot to... He died a year before I was ordained. He couldn't have done me any better favor. Because I didn't know he was doing all of this stuff. Yeah. But then the other part of it I wanted to say too was religion. I know now when I ask somebody, do you think that the United States is a Christian country? They say yes. And I say, do you love your enemy? No. I laugh. And I know that this happens. I know that that's natural. Because what people don't realize is what they, where they get their culture is from the West, from religion. I get people who come in and say, I don't know what to do. I don't understand God. They come to me because I was a priest. And they say, I guess I'll trust with God. Or, I'm having trouble trusting God. Why we don't understand where our culture comes from, and we don't understand the contradictions in our culture. We don't understand the contradictions because we don't know the philosophy where it comes from, and we don't understand the contradictions that comes from the fights of religion and the contradictions in religion that we don't pay attention to, that partly we get from the contradictions of the religious leaders that we have, who interpret the Bible in so many different ways. And we don't even know that they're correct. You know, we got these books of the Bible that people, the canon of the Bible, the books of the Bible, put in there by men, not women, men. You know, because they fit. You know, they fit their ideas, and they don't know their ideas are driven by Aristotelian philosophy, which doesn't allow contradiction. I was a priest. I'm no longer a priest. Because I can't believe in an anthropomorphic God, because anthropomorphism is what we're talking about now, and we've got to change our way. And the changes go into psychology so strongly because I don't even know how to say it. We talk about when we teach people about not telling people what to do. well, what the hell is cognitive behavioral therapy? Except telling people what to do. I tell people, which I've never heard before, is in the process of client-centered, patient-centered therapy, that it's not patient-centered because we write the damn treatment plan, not give it to the patient to write, that we talk to them and give them advice, this is what you have to do, instead of asking them. And when you say to them, did it work? They say no. We tell them what to do. Instead of saying, why don't you think it worked? And what would you like to do differently? That's patient-centered therapy. Not telling them what to do. It is so inclusive what we're talking about. Am I making any sense at all?
Yes.
Any questions that you have?
Well, I was just going back to the epistemology of love.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's a contradiction too?
Yeah. Life is a contradiction.
Sure.
Yeah. I would.
Yeah.
I would. I would say that very strongly.
Epistemology is the study of truth, and love is really just a powerful, positive emotion, a feeling.
Yeah.
So, but you believe in it. You believe in contradictions now.
Oh, yeah.
And you didn't before.
That's right. But how do I say it? It's really interesting how you put that. I believe in contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
That's a contradiction.
Yeah.
But I believe it. And I believe that people really believe in that same thing. And what I mean by that is they experience the love that we have for them if we really believe in contradictions. And that's a contradiction. But that's what makes it real.
I think in Western culture, people don't want to believe in contradictions.
Yeah, I hear you, and I believe that's because they don't understand where their beliefs are coming from.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I don't blame them.
Well, no, you can't.
Yeah. And they feel that. They feel that. I mean, how many times have you had a couple in where they're fighting? And they keep fighting. And you say, why are you fighting? Well, I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I respond? You may be. What does it accomplish? What? How could people feel better, and how can you get along? We have a divorce rate of more than are married. Isn't that true? That doesn't make any sense. Because we don't understand the epistemology, which is acceptance of contradiction. I'm trying to think of, is there anything that I haven't said that I should say?
I think you covered everything that we kind of brainstormed the other day.
Did we?
Yeah. You talked about the matrices and the evolution and the history and contradictions.
I think I'm done.
Okay. I think so too. And if there's anything that you feel like adding, I can always add more. So
Okay.
but I think your message is great, and I'm glad that you're getting that out there.
Do you think so?
Yes. Love is God, and God is love. It's one of the first things you ever told me. And I asked
what I believe.
I know.
That's what I believe.
I asked if you believed in God, and you said yes, but not like you think.
Yeah.
And
What I'm doing now is having a little more fun with that. They said, do you believe in God? I said, no. Yes. I believe that God is love.
yeah,
And that makes sense.
it does.
That makes sense
It
to
does.
me. I can't believe the loving God. You could miss Mass at 65, not get the confession, die, and go to hell. It doesn't make sense for a loving God. That isn't God is love. And so I should say somebody has to follow this, no. No, that doesn't make any sense to me. And when we look at the world, what is this? If people believe that, this election year shit would be different.
good about this?
Huh?
Do you feel good about this? Are you wanting to?
I do.
Okay.
But I'm worried.
Yeah? Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. Small.